Now to help us unpack the latest developments and their implications on regional security, we are joined by international affairs analyst Professor Renato de Castro, live from Taiwan. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good morning, Gretchen. How are you doing?
Okay, Professor, what is happening now? I mean, all of these sudden stake over territories in the South China Sea, particularly, let's say, the Sandy Cay. We saw that China released a piece of news saying that they have seized it. The Philippine government refuted it, saying that's not true. What is your sense over what is happening?
I think it's China showing that it's not very happy with the ongoing Balikatan exercise. So China is playing what I call a form of cognitive warfare. The attack is primarily psychological to impress upon us that the Balikatan exercise that you're conducting with the United States, the deployment of the Nemesis missiles, the presence of the Typhoon missiles there, what we call the rehearsals that being conducted will have consequences. And one possible consequence is the fact that we could occupy Sandy Cay and you cannot do anything about it. And of course, after we occupy Sandy Cay, guess what would be next? So the Chinese are expert regarding this form of what you call cognitive warfare or psychological warfare.
So you would call it fake news that China has seized Sandy Cay, from what you know from your sources?
Fake news is part of it. Again, fake news is a form of a psychological warfare. It creates the impression that we have the capability to do so, and we could do so. So again, they're playing with our what I call the fighting the battlefield in what we call the cognitive domain, along of course with some other actions. For example, the passage of the Shandong in the Batanes Strait. Then of course the presence of 3 Chinese warships as the maritime cooperative activity was being conducted. So this is part of what I think is Chinese effort to basically impress upon us your close security relationship with the United States. The Balikatan exercises that are happening will have consequences. And we're showing to you what will be those consequences.
Speaking of the Shandong, what do you think it is researching over there? Is it just part of their Cywar or meron talagang tinitingnan doon?
Basically, it's impressing upon us and to the Americans, we're not intimidated by your nemesis, your Navy Marine enhanced interdiction system. We're not intimidated by that. We're not intimidated by that group. Of course, they could do it. They could send a carrier battle group under peacetime condition. But at the same time, impressing upon us, we're not intimidated whatever actions, whatever weapon system you're deploying, even as far as Batanes. And we could, in fact, deploy a carrier battle group as near as the coast of northern Luzon.
Okay, going to the Sandy case, what do you think is the broader implication if ever China does get control over the Sandy case? Romel Ong, Rear Admiral Romel Ong mentioned yesterday in Storycon that the government had plans to actually build a post over in Sandy Cay 2 na sabi niya ay pinigilan ng Duterte administration. Sa iyong pag-aaral,
Ang challenge of building a structure there is that I think the history behind Sandy Cay. It was created because of the debris generated by the Chinese creation of artificial islands. So I don't think any structure would be able to stay there for a long time because Sandy Cay isn't artificial. It's not artificial in the sense it's created by human beings, but it is a result of human actions. The destruction of several coral reefs, primarily by the Chinese, when they build those artificial islands. And I think, I guess I'm basing this from what Associate Justice Carpio told me. So it was carried by the waters, creating that sort of an artificial island. So I don't think any structure could stand on the artificial feature of Sandy Cay. And of course, if China or the Philippines would occupy it, this would be in violation of the spirit of the 2002 Declaration of the Code of Conduct, that no feature in the South China Sea should be occupied. There should be no new occupation. So this is a sort of a game both the Philippines and of course China are playing.
Actually, tinanong namin yan kay Jonathan Anticamara, one of the scientists who went to the marine resource assessment there. At ang sabi niya, it could not have drifted from Subi Reef because yung Sandy Cay 4 ay hindi mahahanapan nung ganong debris. Yung Sandy Cay 1, 2, and 3 lamang. Pero yung 4, bakit daw na-spare yun, no? Kung talagang ito ay galing sa Subi Reef. So,
Yeah.
actually, a lot of questions still. But what does the UN arbitral ruling say about Subi Reef and what the occupation of Sandy Cay could possibly mean? Did we get that right? In a report that we aired prior to this interview, did we get that right? That if somebody takes over Sandy Cay, then dun sa territorial sea nito, masasama yung Subi Reef at possibly yung Pag-asa.
Gretchen, I'm not a legal expert. I'm not in a position to talk about UNCLOS. So
Okay.
a better person will be probably Professor J. Matumbakal or Associate Justice Garfield.
okay.
I'm sorry, I cannot answer it. My area of specialization is primarily the strategic domain, not the legal aspect. I'm sorry, I could not answer it.
All right, no problem. Okay, let's go to what you mentioned, the 2002 Code of Conduct. No? As you mentioned, dapat walang pagbabago dito sa South China Sea, as agreed upon by the nations who signed that Code of Conduct together with China. But that's not what we're seeing at the Sandy Cays, at the Bajo de Masinloc. Nakita natin that they have strengthened or tightened their controls over Bajo de Masinloc. What is happening here? Should we hear more of the other ASEAN countries protest what China is doing?
First of all, as the term implied, the declaration of the Code of Conduct is not binding. It's separate from the Code of Conduct that's being negotiated right now. Regarding most ASEAN countries, possibly with the exception of Vietnam, don't expect much. Many member states of the Association of Southeast Asian countries, especially, of course, those in continental Southeast Asia, couldn't care less about what's happening in the South China Sea, and more specifically in this land features. It's not in their interest. Cambodia, Myanmar, don't expect them. Among the littoral Southeast Asian states, I won't have to mention them. They want to maintain a close, they maintain their close economic relation with China. So they don't want to touch the sensitive nerves of China when it comes to this. So when it comes to this issue, this is primarily our concern and probably Vietnam. But for the rest of Southeast Asian countries, it's none of their business.
So, wala tayong asahan, no, sa mga ibang ASEAN countries when it comes to these changes.
I guess not, unless of course maybe next year, because they'll be attending the ASEAN activities. We're the host, so probably in terms of rhetoric, they would voice their concerns, so forth and so on. But at the end of the day, it's not their interest to get involved in the South China Sea issue.
Now, I want to go to what you said a while ago about the Balikatan exercises, ruffling China's feathers. Could the Taiwan equation be involved here?
Yeah, because again, the Balikatan exercise, the full, what's the term is, full battle tests we're conducting, especially in the Batanes, is a signal to the Chinese that, and of course the announcement of Lieutenant General Romeo Browner a couple of weeks ago, that we cannot, we cannot be neutral when it comes to a Chinese invasion of Taiwan because of the proximity and because of the fact we have hundreds of, about, I think, 250,000 Filipinos working here in Taiwan. So in a way, we're touching to what the Chinese would call the core of their core interests. In 2010, China announced 3 core interests. There are, of course, Tibet, South China Sea, and the most important for them, of course, is Taiwan. So the mere fact that we're touching basically indicating that we will not be passive if China would pursue, of course, in addressing the core of its core interest, which is Taiwan. It's telling us, your actions that has to do anything to do with Taiwan, South China Sea, and of course, the fact that you're bringing an external actor will have consequences.
What is the temperature over there in Taiwan? As you mentioned,
It's very cool. It's very cool. It's 21 degrees and it was raining yesterday.
So we don't expect anything in 2025. There's no cause for
Hopefully,
alarm still.
yeah. Again, if you're talking about Taiwan, you're talking about the Davidson window, which is, of course, the assessment of then U.S. Indo-PACOM Commander Admiral Davidson about the possibility that China would effect its armed unification with Taiwan. The date's supposed to be 2027. That's, of course, also indicated by President Xi Jinping. He wants the Taiwan issue, the Taiwan question resolved by 2027.
Given the Psy-war tactics implemented by China, as you mentioned, how should the Philippine government respond then and play this game? Should we even be playing this kind of game too?
We have to play it smart because China have all the aces in sleeves because it has the largest navy in the world. It has, of course, the military. It could basically occupy Sandy Cay and, of course, triggered another major crisis. So we have to play it smartly. Have to take, while also playing it smartly, we have to also to be aware of calculated risks we have to take.
And what does that mean? I mean, in concrete terms, should we also try to raise the Philippine flag in different territories all over the West Philippine Sea? I mean, is that how we should play it?
And that's a calculated risk. If the government would like to take it, well, that's it. Every action we take, given the fact that China has all the aces in sleeves, have to be on the basis of a calculated risk.
Meaning we should be a little bit more on the offense mode instead of being on
I
the
have to play
receiving
it
end.
prudently.
Okay.
I have to play it prudently. Just like what Sun Tzu would say, we should be like water. A water adjusts to the terrain. But of course, in the case of the terrain, China's a very big terrain.
What is your sense on the United States? One of their first moves was to send Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth over to the Philippines. Is there continuity over the U.S. government's stance at yung aasahan natin sa kanila when it comes to the Mutual Defense Treaty?
Well, they have to look at terms of the broad. What's the policy of the Trump administration? The Trump administration has actually been consistent ever since 2027, when it openly declared a strategic competition against China and Russia. But of course, right now, the real focus is China. So it has been consistent since 2017, first Trump administration up to now. The priority is, if you have to look at all American actions going on, number one, of course, is the decision to slowly shift away from its focus in Europe and what they call the Euro-Atlantic, and of course, the addressing Russian invasion of Ukraine, to efforts, of course, to annex Panama, get control of the Panama Canal, the tariff war, and even the decision to increase U.S. defense budget by $1 trillion. All of them are directed, of course, in addressing what they call, I'm using the euphemism used by the Pentagon and even by the White House, the peer competitor. The most capable peer competitor that the United States is facing right now, and that is, of course, China. What they call this is a term they use, sort of a creeping threat of China. Slowly, China's threat is becoming more apparent than ever from the perspective, of course, of the White House.
And what does the economic or trade war have to do with what's happening out at sea? Is that totally separate from
It's
that?
part. It's part. Number one, of course, with the trade war, the target of the trade war is actually China. Among the countries that had been hit by the tariff, almost all countries sought negotiation with the Trump administration, with one exception, and that's China. China is the only country that immediately retaliated against the United States action. And of course, the tariff is also linked with the need of the Trump administration to raise resources that would, of course, enable it to finance, to pay for a $1 trillion defense expenditure. That, of course, will be submitted next fiscal year, 2026. U.S. defense budget would go up to $1 trillion. How could the Trump administration raise $1 trillion given the fact that it's now affecting what we call tax breaks, especially for many affluent Americans? The only way that the United States could raise that $1 trillion for its defense expenditure is, of course, tariff. and also an effort to effect a deindustrialization of China. Because companies right now in China, American companies right now in China are moving out because they would lose money if they continue shipping their products from China to the United States because of how many? 146% tariff.
But when it comes to the Philippines, how do we view our economic relations with China? If on one end we're fighting them out at sea, on the other end we have the Chinese government reaching out to the Philippines, possibly to strengthen trade relations over missed opportunities with the United States. They have said that there are possible business ties that we can strengthen. Should we go that route? Paano natin hihimayin yun, ano?
Yeah, we're really caught in the middle of a great power competition. But I think the president already made a decision that we have to align ourselves with the United States. And of course, take into account the visit of President Xi Jinping in Southeast Asia. He visited 3 countries, Vietnam, Cambodia, Malaysia. Obviously, we skip is the Philippines.
We make those negotiations with the big picture in mind, and for sure, it will be a smarter, wiser decision. Maraming salamat, Professor Renato de
Thank you very much,
Castro,
Gretchen. Thank you very much to our viewers.
helping
Have a great day.
analyze all that's happening out in the West Philippine Sea. Thank you so much for joining us from Taiwan. Ingat po kayo dyan.